Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi urges Global South to work unitedly in confronting food and energy security crisis and pressing challenge of terrorism and extremism. Addressing third Voice of Global South Summit, Prime Minister pledges contribution of $25 million for Social Impact Fund to accelerate progress in the region. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar strongly advocates need for reform multilateralism at the Global South Summit, says reform is essential to revive its credibility. Gaza ceasefire talks paused until next week. US President says deal closer than ever, sends Secretary of State to Israel to continue intensive efforts to conclude the agreement. India's Health Minister JP Nadda reviews Mpox situation and preparedness at meeting in New Delhi, says no cases of the pox so far in the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the third edition of Voice of Global South Summit on Saturday. Over 120 countries from the developing world participated in the deliberations. The summit explored the convergences of these nations over issues of common interest such as food, health and energy security. Prime Minister Modi called for unity among the member nations and expanded India's development role in the region with the proposal of Global Development Compact. Here's more.
India hosted the third Voice of the Global South Summit on Saturday. The forum envisages bringing together countries of the Global South to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform. The theme of the summit was An Empowered Global South for a Sustainable Future. Addressing the summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed concern about the current global atmosphere of uncertainty and challenges.
चारों ओर अनिश्चितता का माहौल है। हम क्लाइमेट चेंज की चुनौतियों का सामना तो कर ही रहे हैं और अब हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, फूड सिक्योरिटी और एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी की चिंताएं भी है। आतंकवाद, अतिवाद और अलगाववाद हमारे समाजों के लिए गंभीर खतरा बने हुए हैं।
Talking about India's engagement with the Global South, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said India has emerged as a first responder in situations of humanitarian crisis from Gaza to Papua New Guinea.
मानवीय संकट के समय भारत एक फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्डर की तरह अपने मित्र देशों की सहायता कर रहा है। चाहे पापुआ न्यू गिनी में ज्वालामुखी फटने की घटना हो या कीनिया में बाढ़ की घटना, हमने गाजा और यूक्रेन जैसे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट क्षेत्रों में भी मानवीय सहायता प्रदान की है।
In his closing remarks, Prime Minister Modi proposed a comprehensive global development compact that will assist partner countries in the Global South in achieving balanced and inclusive growth using India's experience in development journey.
भारत की ओर से एक व्यापक ग्लोबल डेवलपमेंट कॉम्पैक्ट का प्रस्ताव रखना चाहता हूं। इस कॉम्पैक्ट की नींव भारत की विकास यात्रा और विकास साझेदारी के अनुभवों पर आधारित होगी। यह कॉम्पैक्ट ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों द्वारा स्वयं निर्धारित की गई विकास प्राथमिकताओं से प्रेरित होगा।
PM Modi gave clarion call for unity among countries of the Global South. He called for closer cooperation in the domain of trade for development, capacity building for sustainable development, technology sharing, concessional finance among nations of the Global South. India has pledged $25 million for the Social Impact Fund. The Prime Minister said the upcoming Summit of the Future would be an important milestone to bridge the gap between global North and South. With inputs from Amritpal Singh, Shubhendu Ghosh's report for DD India.
At the Foreign Minister session of the third Voice of Global South Summit, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar urged Global South countries to work together as family to facilitate flow of low-cost financing and critical technologies.
Takes place as the world grapples with multiple conflicts, tensions, and stresses. We, the nations of the Global South, are particularly impacted. The purpose of this exchange of views is to define our interests through that process. Hence, the theme of this session, charting a unique paradigm for the Global South. We must work together as a family towards facilitating the flow of low-cost financing and critical technologies to the Global South.
At the third Virtual Voice of Global South Summit, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar highlighted the importance of global institutions and governance architecture and the need to reform multilateralism to revive its credibility, access to finance and technology to unlock development potential of Global South. India Stack and DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure, stand out as Indian contributions. Need for collective initiatives to show greater willingness to act on issues of common interest, making interdependence a strength through intensifying South-South interactions to ensure that exposures and vulnerabilities are not leveraged, increasing convergences between Global South countries on issues central to the region. And Minister Jaishankar said that the summit brought together the countries of Global South to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform across a whole range of issues. Participants talked about various global challenges, including economic inequality, energy security, and impact of climate change.
One, of course, was that the problems which they all raised, which was the core of the discussion, where today food, health and energy security issues, the challenges faced on resources and accessing resources, the problem of realizing the demographic dividend, concerns about employment and about economic inequality. There was a very strong focus on their climate concerns. So almost every leader spoke about the extreme weather. Many referred to the emissions challenge, growing pollution. A few of them brought up specifically water issues, biodiversity, and the small island developing states were particularly articulate about their predicament.
An External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, addressing the media, said at the summit some of the leaders spoke about the world moving towards multipolarity, and this is reflective of the workings of the Global South. He said there is unanimity with regard to the reforms at the United Nations, which some countries said was much delayed and much needed.
Is moving towards multipolarity, and this is reflected too should be reflected in the workings of the Global South, where the UN and global architecture was concerned. I would say there was almost a unanimous view, in fact a unanimous view, that there was need for reform, that this was much delayed. Some countries very specifically referred to who they felt should be permanent members of the United Nations. Really, we believe in a democratic world order. Then we think this 190 odd members should be allowed to vote about the future of the UN, like many of us vote about our respective futures. And we feel that process has been unduly and unfairly blocked. So our striving is in that direction. We know that it is not without its challenges, but we continue to persevere.
Broadly, Minister Jaishankar summed up the outcome of the summit, saying that there were broadly 10 points of discussion at the Global South Summit. These are as follows: food, health, energy, security issues, challenges faced on resources and accessing resources, problem of realizing demographic dividend for the countries, concerns around employment, economic inequality in the region, strong focus on climate concerns, broad concerns on Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, debt burden faced by many members of the Global South, challenges of harnessing, adapting to new technology, and a lot on advocacy of sharing of best practices. Moving on, the IMF Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinath has said that India is doing very well in terms of growth rates. The United States Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates told a 2,000 plus Indian American community in Seattle that India, and I quote, he says, a global leader with breakthrough innovations in areas like technology, agriculture and healthcare. Let's take a look at the underlying conditions that give these statements a context.
August 2024, and the Reserve Bank of India's policy panel retained a 7.2% growth forecast for FY25. The MPC during its June 2024 meeting had also forecast India's GDP to grow at 7.2% in FY25. India is clocking a steady 7+ GDP growth rate through every quarter of the financial year. Last year, or FY24, the Indian economy grew at 8.2%. This year's union budget is providing the right direction for that growth.
The theme is on women-led development, on providing skilling and jobs for youth, and presenting an overall healthy fiscal consolidation position where we are moving from a $3 trillion economy to a $5 trillion economy, from the 10th to the 5th, and we are moving, according to the IMF, to the third largest economy in the world by 2027.
Let's look at some key stats. Foreign exchange reserves have risen from $290 billion to more than $645 billion, and of a total FDI of $1 trillion over the last 78 years of India's independence, $600 billion in FDI have come in just the last 8 years. FDI comes to India from 160 countries and is directed in 61 sectors. The number of direct taxpayers too has doubled, strengthening the government's finances. This reflects strong animal spirits.
We started off with 356 startups. Today we have 140,000 startups. We have about 135 unicorns. We've created the third best ecosystem in the world. The startup ecosystem would get a huge impetus from the abolition of the angel tax, which has now been done.
Over the last 10 years, the Modi government has been successfully maintaining an equilibrium between the requirements of economic growth and the need to promote welfare of the disadvantaged sections. A Niti Aayog report says around 250 million people have escaped poverty over the last 10 years. Also reflecting the optimism in India's growth story, India's sensitive index on the Bombay Stock Exchange has been very sensitive to India's potential, rising from a low of around 25,000 during COVID-19 to over 80,000 now. Bureau Report, DD India.
And still to come on DD India Newshour. Ukraine hopes its incursion into Russia changes the outcome of the war. And Mpox virus outbreak threatens the globe.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. As Russia-Ukraine conflict enters the 11th day of fierce fight in Russian border region of Kursk in particular, Ukrainian Air Force on Saturday said Ukraine's air defenses shot down all 14 Russian drones fired in an overnight attack. Earlier, Kursk regional governor Alexei Smirnov said Ukraine had destroyed the road bridge in the region's Glushkov district, where a mass evacuation is underway. Citing Russian security officials, Russia's state news agency claimed that the bridge's destruction could hinder the relocation of Khrushchev's 20,000 inhabitants. Russia's foreign ministry said Ukraine had used Western rockets, likely US-made HIMARS, to destroy a bridge. Taking to the social media account, spokesperson for Russian Foreign Ministry Maria Zakharova said the first time Kursk region was hit by Western-made rocket launchers, probably American HIMARS. The bridge was completely destroyed and the volunteers who were assisting the evacuated civilian population were killed, the statement added. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Russia was suffering losses and that were very helpful for Ukraine's defense.
There have already been several reports from Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi on the frontline situation and our operation in the Kursk region. We see that the occupier is suffering losses, and this is beneficial, very beneficial for our defense. This includes the destruction of the Russian army's logistics and the depletion of their reserves. We must inflict maximum damage on all Russian positions, and we are doing so.
Ukrainian troops claim to have advanced between 1 and 3 kilometers in some areas in Russia's Kursk region. Ukraine's army chief Alexander Syrskyi, in a virtual conversation with Ukrainian President Zelensky, said that Kiev has taken control of some 82 settlements over an area of over 1,100 square kilometers in the region.
The forces of the offensive grouping continue battle operation. On some directions, we have advanced 1 to 3 kilometers towards the enemy. The fighting is ongoing along the whole front line. In general, the situation is under control. Everything is carried out following the plan.
In retaliation, Russian Defense Ministry reported on Friday that its troops had struck Ukrainian targets in Donetsk and other places. The Russian army destroyed 2 units of HIMARS rocket system and a large amount of ammunition in Ukraine's Sunny Oblast. Russian troops also intercepted a number of US-made missiles and rockets, shot down multiple Ukrainian drones and sank several unmanned Ukrainian boats. And for more updates, we are joined by Dasha Chernyshyova live from Moscow. Dasha, what is the latest on the fighting underway on various fronts?
Well, certainly the Kursk incursion is in focus for many of the Russian nationals who are following this situation. We understand from the briefing of Russia's Ministry of Defense that they have been repelling the Ukrainian attempts to move deeper in a number of directions in the Kursk region, namely near the villages of Kareneva, near Ruske, Cherkaske, Porechne. Russia has been preventing the Ukrainian military from moving any deeper. We also are hearing that the Russian military have been fighting against the mobile groups of the Ukrainian troops in the forests that are near Alexeysk and Kauchuk. This is all in the Kursk direction. And also, Russian Ministry of Defense says the total number of the Ukrainian losses since the start of this incursion last Tuesday has exceeded 3,000 people already. At the same time, the officials here in Russia, they all stress that they have the information that Ukraine has started the preparation towards the attack against Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant that is located in the Kursk region in the city of Kurchatov. And Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has urged the international organizations to condemn any such plans by Ukraine, because this is going to lead to a technogen catastrophe of a very large scale. So Russia is now saying that Ukraine has embarked on this preparation and calls on the international community to prevent that from happening.
And do these recent developments in the battlefield take the key adversaries closer or further away from any kind of negotiated peace?
Well, certainly from Russia's point of view, any prospect of ceasefire negotiations has been put on the long hold. That's in the words of Russian Foreign Ministry representatives. We're also hearing from Moscow that one of the goals of this incursion by Ukraine was indeed to improve Ukraine's negotiating positions against the backdrop of the disadvantages and the failures on the battlefields in the Donbas area and elsewhere in the area of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. And Moscow insists that if Ukraine wants wanted to improve its positions, it has failed to do so. On top of that, Moscow is saying that it is not withdrawing its troops from the number of directions where Ukraine, according to Moscow, was hoping Moscow would be taking its troops out to defend its Kursk region. So from the Russian perspective, the prospect of finding a negotiated solution, a negotiated settlement, is even further away, given the very fact that Moscow calls this the terrorist activities and says the Ukrainian officials have dared to attack the civilian population of Russia's border regions. Hence, Moscow says there is nothing to talk about with the current Ukrainian authorities.
Dasha, thank you for joining us with those updates. Moving on, the Gaza ceasefire talks in Doha paused on Friday, with negotiators to meet again next week. In a joint statement, the US, Qatar and Egypt said Washington had presented a new proposal that built on points of agreement over the past week, closing gaps in a way that could allow rapid implementation of a deal. Mediators would keep working on the proposal, they said. Sarah Coates has more from Tel Aviv.
Certainly appears as though progress has been made, although these mediating parties say gaps still remain, but it does remain unclear as to what these gaps actually are. But certainly what we can expect throughout the next week are these mediating parties to once again come together and really try and get this deal over the line. Now, we do have a statement from Qatar, the United States and also Egypt. It says that both sides were presented with a proposal that narrows the gaps between the parties while being consistent with the principles laid out in the plan presented by President Biden in May. A senior official from our governments will meet again in Cairo before the end of next week, hoping to reach an agreement on the terms set out today, adding there's no time to waste and no excuses for further delay that can be accepted by any party. Now, in the wake of this statement being released, the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, he spoke with his counterpart Lloyd Austin in the United States, and they've been speaking about a moral and strategic imperative to actually get this deal done. And also, of course, this ongoing coordination with this threat of an Iranian attack on Israel looming. Now, what we can expect over the coming days is the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to make yet another wartime visit to the Middle East. He's understood to be visiting Qatar, Egypt, and then also landing here in Tel Aviv. Reporting from Tel Aviv, I'm Sarah Coates for DD India.
Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has said the ceasefire deal is closer, but it is not there yet.
One of the reasons I was late for you all was I was dealing with the ceasefire effort in the Middle East. And we are closer than we've ever been. I don't want to jinx anything, but as my grandfather said, with the grace of God, good little neighbors, a lot of luck, we may have something. But we're not there yet. But it's much, much closer than it was 3 days ago. So keep your fingers crossed.
Let's turn to the other big story of the day. Ever since World Health Organization declared Mpox outbreak in parts of Africa a public health emergency of international concern, countries around the world have enhanced monitoring of the situation, and precautionary measures are also being announced. Although there are no reported cases of monkeypox, Mpox, in India as of date, government on Saturday announced certain measures to check its spread. In neighboring Pakistan, one case of Mpox virus has been detected. Besides Asia, other European nations too have enhanced surveillance.
Health officials in Pakistan put safety measures in place after Mpox virus was detected in the country. Passengers were being screened and fumigation was being carried out at the Jinnah International Airport in Karachi on Friday. The country's health ministry confirmed at least one case of Mpox virus in a patient who had returned from a Gulf country. Besides Karachi, passengers were also screened at other airports, and an isolation ward was set up in a hospital in Peshawar. It was not clear whether it was of a new variant or of the clade that has been spreading globally since 2022. In India, Health Minister JP Nadda took a detailed review of the monkeypox situation and the preparedness. As of now, there are no reported cases of monkeypox in India. It was decided in the meeting that, as a matter of abundant caution, certain measures, including sensitizing the health units at all the airports, seaports and ground crossings, readying the testing laboratories, gearing up health facilities for detecting, isolating and managing any case, are put in place. Besides Asia, a case of monkeypox was also detected in Europe. On Thursday, Sweden confirmed a first case of Mpox, a viral infection that spreads through close contact. Epidemiologists say public awareness of Mpox and its symptoms, as well as efficient isolation and contact tracing procedures, are key to preventing the spread of the virus.
This is a person that were traveling in the region where we do have the clade 1b, that this is the new variant of Mpox. And when coming home to Sweden, developing symptoms, very quickly diagnosed and isolated. And the person is doing good, but sort of that is all I can tell you, sort of the details of this person.
German infection expert on Friday called for existing Mpox vaccine supplies to be shipped to Africa, where they would have the greatest potential to tackle the disease.
I would not recommend a general vaccination campaign for the general population or at-risk populations at this stage. It is also clear that the vaccines that are available globally are urgently needed in Africa, are urgently needed in regions where the virus currently is spreading, and there is a severe shortage of vaccines.
On Friday, officials of the World Health Organization and the International Federation of the Red Cross advised against any travel restrictions to stop the spread of Mpox. On Wednesday, the World Health Organization had declared Mpox a global public health emergency for the second time in 2 years, following an outbreak of the viral infection in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Bureau Report, DD India.
And for more on the story, we are joined by Isabel Nakeria, DD India correspondent from Kampala. Isabel, even as Mpox cases are detected in different continents, how are Uganda and other African nations dealing with the outbreak?
Of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo remains the epicenter of the outbreak, and of course this has spread rapidly to neighboring countries like Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda and Burundi, which is of course cause for alarm. And of course the WHO reports 90% of all cases and deaths in Africa this year from the Democratic Republic of Congo. But there is something that is worrying most, because many of these cases are coming from the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a conflict area, and that is limiting emergency care. And many of the people there are also living in refugee camps, and of course there's overcrowding, and sexual violence is reported highly there. And you know, monkeypox is spread sexually, and of course this is causing fears. But all these countries are stepping up efforts after the global alert as a public health emergency, and emergency cares like surveillance and spreading of awareness, and of course laboratory analysis. But of course there's limited funding, and these countries are urging for donations from international bodies and well-wishers to help them step up these efforts. The WHO says it's giving $1.5 million to these countries, but of course this is a drop in the ocean.
Isabel, could you tell us a little more on what is being done to prevent the spread of the disease?
Uganda and other African countries are stepping up efforts, especially at the borders of the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's awareness spread, there is surveillance, and of course laboratory analysis in many of these countries. But as I said, limited funding is, of course, limiting them to do many of these things. And of course, Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo have suffered emergency epidemics of recently the Ebola epidemic which spread through, and of course Uganda is also struggling with a refugee influx, and this is stretching resources in the country. So a lot of resources is needed from the international donors to help them manage this, and they're also expecting vaccines from the WHO, but of course many of there's limited vaccines. But the vaccines available are also not yet listed for emergency use. So the WHO says it's working on that, And for now, we understand that it's also working with countries in the global north to give donations of the smallpox, which they have a lot of it in stockpiles. And before that is done, of course, there's a lot of fear that is spreading in these countries.
Isabel, appreciate you joining us with those updates from Kampala. Stay safe. Still to come on DD India News Hour. We talk about India's initiative to bring together countries of the Global South to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform across a range of issues. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. India today hosted the third Voice of Global South Summit. To talk about the key takeaways, joining me is a special guest in the studio, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, DG RIS for developing countries and also eminent economist. Good evening and welcome, sir, to our studios. Now, your key takeaways of the summit outcome, and also as the countries of the Global South articulate a common voice, what kind of a strategic role could a platform like this summit could play in negotiating their demands going forward?
Thank you, Shubhendu. I think it's a very important platform that India has nurtured, the Voice of Global South Summit. This was the third in the series. And if you look at how Prime Minister today evolved the idea in terms of providing a platform to share their respective development experiences, insights, collating evidences, and then eventually when he was closing, he brought in this very unique idea of development compact, where he said that any imbalance in the modalities of engagement among Global South countries may create distress, as alarming in case of the debt crisis. So how whether we are transferring technology, whether we are providing market access in trade, or we are even doing the capacity building, providing grants and concessional finance, all the 5 elements that he mentioned, there has to be in harmony. And he said India would dedicate itself to keep this harmony, and hence he proposed the development compact. So the idea, Shubhendu, is developing countries are going through huge distress of liquidity crisis, debt crisis, on top of that food security challenge, health security challenge, energy security challenge. So multiple complexities and challenges in terms of access to development finance.
Right.
So today developing countries shared their perspectives, and as you might have already gathered, there were parallel sessions for health, for finance, for agriculture, for youth, for different dimensions of their engagement. And they have raised several issues which later External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar briefed media about that. So I think it's a very important initiative that has come in.
Right. You mentioned the Global Development Compact that Prime Minister announced, and he talks about a human-centric version in which the debt burden could be eased for developing countries. In that sense, Professor Chaturvedi, what kind of alternative model of multilateralism, economic multilateralism, is Global South articulating here?
So, Shubhendu, this is very important point. With the rise of emerging economies in the Global South, like India, like Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, China, we see that there is need for self-discipline in terms of providing support to developing countries. It cannot be always driven by narrow self-interest. And that's what Prime Minister has emphasized, that we have to be empathetic to our partner countries. We have to have the spirit of Global South partnership uppermost in our minds. And that's why he said that human-centric development. He did not say resource targeting development framework. So that's where equality, horizontality that the South-South cooperation brings in, that spirit of being demand driven and not thrusting our market requirements through corridor and connectivity projects and ending up with extractive strategies. So that's where Prime Minister today indirectly hinted, suggested, and partner countries have responded to this call of development compact that he has proposed today.
Right, and in view of the remarks that Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered, how do you also read the characteristics of India's leadership in the Global South region? Prime Minister talks about the G20, where the attention of the developed world was steered towards the needs of the Global South. And then he also speaks about as India as the first responder to crisis from Gaza to Papua New Guinea.
Absolutely right, Suvendu. And if you see Prime Minister's global leadership, there are three characteristics that Prime Minister Modi has always exhibited. One certainly is to come up with new ideas and new institutional frameworks to take the task forward. During the G20 presidency and after its closing, the second Voice of Global South Summit, he announced setting up of Dakshin, the Global South Center of Excellence. This is to share India's own development experience. So the first characteristic of any Global South leader should be in terms of new ideas, new suggestions, new pathways for development. So that's one. The second is restraint, and Prime Minister Modi has shown huge restraint in terms of demands by India during the COVID crisis. So the Vishwamitra image that we wanted to project. So COVID, our people needed vaccines, but the global community also needed vaccine, and India ensured that, delivered it, even during the war times in many parts of the world. India has shared food grains despite of the fact that domestic prices have gone up. So we have restrained our demand. And third characteristic, which I think is extremely important, is to avoid any kind of polarization. So Prime Minister Modi at one end is saying Global South partnership, but on the other he is saying that this is not anti-West. It is to take West along with the Global South. And that's where he is talking about triangular cooperation. So this, I think, is a perfect balancing that the Global South require. Nobody needs polarization at this point. They need resources for development. They want a fair world, and they want their own national space for decision making. And PM Modi, by giving all these three, has naturally assumed that leadership role in the Global South.
Right, and the kind of egalitarian space that Prime Minister Modi asked Global South to imagine, India could make very important interventions in that area. There's digital public infrastructure and more.
Absolutely. Dr. Jaishankar today explained at length in terms of how digital public infrastructure, how our idea of vaccines and idea of one health, one world, the idea of bringing in accelerated approach on sustainable development goals, also trying to bring in solar energy like our own experience of rooftop solar panels that we are planning to provide, the idea of water, biodiversity and natural resource conservation strategies that are needed, but also at the same time providing necessary policy lessons from India's own development experience. So how those insights are to be collated and shared with the Global South.
Right, and also I think a congregation of nations of the Global South provides an important platform for a critique of the global order as well. And I think something that stood out in Dr. Jaishankar's press conference was the idea of shifting goalposts that the leaders talked about. And in the domain of climate change, that no country, especially the countries of the Global South, remain untouched. What could be the road ahead with these ideas being discussed by these countries?
One point, Suvendu, that came up was in terms of encouraging North to respect their commitments. If you recall, 1970, we decided that 0.7% of GNP should be contributed as part of ODA. Not many developed countries have respected, and this even now has not been achieved. Some have already permanently deferred it. Then they promised $100 billion for climate change funds. That has also disappeared. So encouraging North to respect their commitment is one. But second is enabling Global South countries to evolve their own indigenous development strategies. India has demonstrated that. In last 7 budgets, Finance Minister herself has been pushing in enhanced budgetary allocations for capital expenditure. So India's focus on capital expenditure on infrastructure is showing the way for the Global South to take it forward.
Right. And so finally, how do you interpret Prime Minister Narendra Modi's passionate call for unity among the countries of Global South, particularly in the context of their ability to possibly negotiate together in multilateral forums and reforms of multilateral forums like the UN?
This is one very serious issue, and I think Prime Minister, during his 2 addresses that he had, a closing and opening, if you combine the 2, you get 2 or 3 messages very clearly. First and foremost is the onslaught of social media and technology for disturbing democratically elected governments, for attacking institutions which are trying to work in terms of a reconstruction of several countries. So the national government's efforts are thwarted by these efforts. So one call that PM has given is to bring in greater understanding on AI and AI governance, also trying to bring in formats in which Global South can collectively raise voice. He gave some examples like on climate change, like on Future Summit, what kind of collated efforts we can make to bring Global South's issues at the center stage. The second part is the development derailment that has happened post-COVID, and there his idea was that how we enhance development finance, the cost of accessing it should be reduced, quantum should be expanded, and we bring back our economies for sustainable development and the goals that we accepted.
Right. On that note, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, thank you very much for joining us on the Newshour, sharing your perspective. Moving on, outgoing Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is finalizing plans to visit the United States in late September for the UN General Assembly and a possible meeting with President Joe Biden. According to media reports, the visit may take place for several days starting on September 22nd. Kishida on Wednesday dropped out of the leadership race for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, meaning that he will step down as Prime Minister when his term as party leader ends in late September. The date of the LDP election is not yet set. It could be as early as September 20th, in which case Kishida would likely address the General Assembly after Japan's parliament, where the LDP has a majority, has chosen his replacement as Prime Minister. Let's now turn to other stories making news today. India's Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar presided over the 23rd anniversary celebrations of Prasar Bharati Trust in Venkatachalam, Andhra Pradesh. Addressing the gathering, Vice President underscored the critical need for optimal consumption of natural resources. He emphasized on the overuse of natural resources that pose significant threat to future generations. Indian student team bagged multiple prestigious medals at the 17th International Earth Sciences Olympiad in Beijing. The 4-membered Indian team, comprising students from Gujarat, Kerala, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan, won 3 gold and bronze each, 2 silver medals across 3 competition categories. Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, distributed appointment letters to youth under district-level mega employment. Chief Minister also distributed tablets to students under Swami Vivekananda Youth Empowerment Scheme. India's Hyderabad city in Telangana state is experiencing 3rd consecutive day of thunderstorms with heavy rains exceeding 60 mm on Saturday. Many areas across the state are reporting heavy to very heavy rains. And still to come on DD India Newshour. Economy, tax cut and immigration emerge as key issues in the US elections. India's legendary javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra will compete at the Lausanne Diamond League later this month. You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. As the 2024 US elections come closer, the political landscape of the country is increasingly shaped by several pivotal issues such as immigration, economy, middle class, tax cut, among others. Both Republican as well as Democrat candidates outline their vision on such issues and how will they implement them in case they're elected as the leader. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay brings us more.
As the 2024 US elections draw near, the political landscape is increasingly defined by a number of critical issues including immigration, economy, middle class and tax cuts among others. US Vice President Kamala Harris outlined proposals to cut taxes for most Americans, ban price gouging by grocers and build more affordable housing on Friday as part of the opportunity economy she plans to pursue if she wins the White House.
As President, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency, because I strongly believe when the middle class is strong, America is strong.
Harris also pledged to introduce a new child tax credit of as much as $6,000 for families with infants, cut taxes for families with kids, and lower prescription drug costs. The US Vice President said she would be laser focused on the middle class as president. Harris is aiming to draw a contrast with her opponent, Republican Donald Trump, on broad economic values.
2 months ago, I announced that medical debt will no longer be used against your credit score. And I will work as president with states like here in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, thank you again, to cancel medical debt for more and more, millions more Americans. As for Donald Trump, well, he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which 45 million Americans rely on. 45 million Americans rely on it for health care.
Other issues dominating the election campaign is Israel-Hamas conflict. On Thursday, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said he is the candidate to defend Western civilization, Israel and the United States on Thursday.
Kamala Harris is the candidate of the forces who want to destroy Western civilization, but most particularly Israel and Jewish people. And I'm the candidate of those who want to defend Western civilization, defend Israel, and defend the United States of America.
Border security and immigration too are among other issues dominating the election campaign. On Thursday, former President Donald Trump claimed that under Vice President Harris, an estimated 20 million individuals had entered the United States illegally. Trump has promised to launch mass deportations if re-elected. With Bureau Inputs, Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
World's generation of electronic waste is rising 5 times faster than documented e-waste recycling. Our next report underlines that if countries could bring the e-waste collection and recycling rates to about 60% by 2030, it could bring a remarkable change to the world. DD India's John Bever has more from Bristol.
E-waste is a growing problem. Globally, it's estimated the amount produced annually has almost doubled since 2010. This factory in Wales, run by the Royal Mint, has a unique way of dealing with printed circuit boards. Any gold is extracted by a new chemical process that works at room temperature. That makes the process both energy efficient and cost effective. Refurbishment and reuse of existing technology is one way of reducing the amount of e-waste produced. But talking at a parliamentary hearing, those who sell refurbished products like smartphones claim there are deliberate barriers being created.
Some original producers are now putting out software updates that unless it's a genuine part from that producer, you're receiving an error message to say that this has got a non-compatible part. The compatible original part is extremely expensive. It makes repair completely difficult and prohibitive and no longer attractive for the customer.
The vast majority of the UK's e-waste is processed abroad. The World Health Organization have issued warnings about the informal processing of some of it and the potential harm that can be done to those carrying out the work. There is also the issue of e-waste not being recycled.
A lot of products like phones have got smaller as technology improves, but for items like washing machines and tumble dryers, they remain big, heavy and cumbersome. Often you have to pay to have old ones taken away. So when people get new products, the temptation is to illegally dump them.
There are warnings from the Environmental Audit Committee of a forthcoming e-waste tsunami in the UK. It's hoped that more schemes like this gold extraction will reduce the amount being sent to landfill. John Beaver in Bristol reporting for DD India.
In some other news, Hurricane Ernesto has made landfall in Bermuda. U.S. National Hurricane Center said hurricane's epicenter was expected to slowly depart Bermuda later on Saturday and move near or east of Canada's Newfoundland by Monday night. Ernesto's maximum sustained winds have decreased to near 85 miles per hour with higher gusts. The NHC added Ernesto is the fifth named Atlantic storm of what is expected to be an intense hurricane season. Hong Kong will soon welcome 2 more giant pandas from China in late September. The arrival of these iconic animals, which are considered national treasures in China, will further strengthen the bond between Hong Kong and the mainland, while also boosting the city's efforts in wildlife conservation and education. Their arrival is part of a broader initiative to enhance the park's role as a hub for conservation and research on giant pandas. You're watching DT India News Hour. Time for action from the world of sports. India's legendary javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra has confirmed that he will compete at the Lausanne Diamond League later this month. Neeraj won a historic silver medal in the men's javelin throw event at the Paris Olympics. Though he was not fully fit in the finals, the 26-year-old athlete is already training hard to return to the track. Neeraj Chopra did not return to India like the compatriots. He is currently training in Switzerland with his coach Klaus Bartonetz and physio Ishan Marwaha. Indian wrestler Vinesh Phogat returned home following her disqualification from the recently concluded Paris Olympics. Vinesh had assured India of a medal after reaching the finals of the women's 50 kg event at the Paris Olympics 2024. However, things took an unfortunate turn when she was disqualified for being 100 grams overweight during the second weigh-in, the day of a gold medal match. Vinesh's homecoming was long awaited. The Indian team will have a new coach in former national champion Ashutosh Singh for the Davis Cup World Group first round tie against Sweden. The matches will be played on the indoor hard courts at the Royal Tennis Hall in Stockholm on September 14th and 15th. After coach Zishan Ali had quit the job, All India Tennis Association announced the name of Ashutosh, who was involved in the preparation of the team for the last tie against Pakistan. Ashutosh had also served as the national tennis team as coach in the Asian Indoor Games. Sumit Nagal will spearhead the team of Ramkumar Ramanathan, Sriram Balaji, Nikki Ponacha and Siddharth Vishwakarma. The Cricket Association of Nepal has confirmed that Nepal is set to host the ICC Under-19 World Cup Asia qualifier in April of 2025. The competition, featuring 5 teams, will be held in Kathmandu from April 12th to 21st next year. The winner of the qualifier will earn a place in the ICC Under-19 World Cup, which will take place in 2026. Nepal, Afghanistan, Oman, Hong Kong, Singapore and the UAE will battle in the Asian region qualifier. The ICC Under-19 World Cup will take place in Zimbabwe and Namibia, where 16 teams will compete. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on your screens to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.